To my dear Prince Alexis, I did not usurp the crown. I found it in the gutter, and I picked it up with my sword. And it was the people, Alexis, the people who put it on my head. He who saves a nation violates no law. Welcome to Should You Watch This with the Popcorn Priest, a weekly podcast where movie enthusiasts, ex-movie theater projectionists, new and old friends take the time to talk about a movie that we just watched and answer that very question, should or shouldn't you watch this? I'm your host, Chris Compton. Find out why at the time this was the most expensive movie ever made, with some scenes using over 20,000 extras for its battle shots, which to this day remains the highest number of costumed extras in any film. Join us today on the battlefield. Join us to find out in this week's breakdown of Waterloo from 1970.
So there's the great thief of Europe himself.
Is it true what they say that he's a monster?
For 20 years we followed you. You made a road of glory through Europe.
On the field of battle, his hat is worth 50,000 men.
France will not follow you.
But he's not a gentleman.
France will follow me to the stars if I give her another victory.
Gentlemen, today's fox. Wellington, 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 Wellington.
Why are you all so afraid of Wellington? Is it because he beat you in Spain? Is that why?
You really are the best of my generals.
And when, my dear Arthur, will you venture into his lair?
We can't hold him there.
Everything depends on one big battle.
I'll stop him here.
Then it'll be a bloody day.
Welcome back to Should You Watch This with the Popcorn Priest. I'm your host, Chris Compton. Today, as always, we have reoccurring guests, Cole and Taylor.
Hello.
Happy to have you on the pod again.
Happy to reoccur again.
Yes.
Today's pick was Taylor's,
Yes.
and it was Waterloo.
Yes.
From 1970, facing the decline of everything he has worked to obtain, conqueror Napoleon Bonaparte and his army confront the British at the Battle of Waterloo.
That's my new nickname, Napoleon.
Man. It's an
interesting movie.
Honestly, the way you talked about it in terms of Kubrick wanting to direct it and then not,
Well, he wanted to direct a biopic, which this isn't, even though I think this would have worked better than a biopic, just because I don't think that Napoleon's story could be fit into a movie.
Well, but the whole time, I'm watching the opening credits and in my head, I'm thinking, something on this grand of a scale, I thought it was going to be, I forgot his name already. I thought it was going to be Kubrick. And then all of a sudden I realized, what you were telling me, and then just like the grand scale and like the money and effort put into it. It seems like something that, would take a crazy director that would want to put in this much time and effort to pull off for something that...
The director was Sergei
Bondarchuk,
Russian guy. Produced by Dino De Laurentiis. He produced many films in the 70s.
Yeah, back when movies were good.
Number one, this movie can never be made again.
No.
Like it did.
In its own, financial failings kind of made that, this ruined the Napoleon movie. That, it didn't do well, but it's hard to understand, what would have been doing well enough for what... Because it just seems like an absurd, vanity project almost.
Well, it's kind of weird, though.
But anyway, no, I came around to this movie forever ago, just because I was watching a bunch of, probably a little less than a decade ago, just because I was watching a lot of epic movies, a lot of the recent Ridley Scott movies that he's done, Kingdom of Heaven,
the sweeping swords and sandals epics.
Yeah, and then this is one of them as far as notable ones, and it's also interesting, because it made whatchamacallit, it's the reason Barry Lyndon exists, which I'd also saw at that time.
Supposedly, the separation between Kubrick and MGM was already scheduled to happen before this even went into production, because they were trying to put it together, but then it never came to pass. But then it kind of put a halt to the swords and sandals afterwards. But Kubrick had already decided to leave the project before it kind of got into it.
It seems like that there wasn't money for it after this didn't do well. They were willing to bet on it big once.
Well, but at the same time too, it's working with him, it was, the
Yeah,
entire
no.
production team against Stanley Kubrick the way he wanted to do it. So it was probably more to not looking forward to a 3-month shoot that turns into 9 months because there's 1,000 takes of, of Napoleon saying goodbye to his troops at the beginning, to get that perfect shot over and over again.
And they did announce that Ridley Scott was going to make a new one. Like, that's in the works with, what's his name? The Joker in the most recent movie.
Oh, Phoenix? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I read that.
They were gonna do a Napoleon biopic, and it was just that was another thing that reminded me. It's like yeah, they'll probably do it, and it could be okay, but like it's not gonna be this insane thousands and thousands of people in the same shot.
Horses, and just
but at the same time,
it's just the nature of filmmaking now.
Well, that's
like,
what
you wouldn't even be able to put it together.
Well, not even that. I mean, even if there wasn't a budgetary concern, if it was anybody but Ridley Scott, who's got 37 projects that are always in demand, where if it's going to happen, it might not happen for 15 years because he's got so much other stuff that he puts on his plate. Which,
how old is Ridley Scott?
He's in his 70s. He's up there.
It's crazy.
I mean, so is Martin Scorsese, though, and they just keep making movies. Same with Steven Spielberg.
Eastwood's like 95.
Clint Eastwood's like 90. And
he's nearing 100. He's like 95.
No, he's like 91 or 90. He's not 100.
I just saw an article the other day where it was like he's nearing 100.
Well, I mean, 90 is awfully close to 100.
I'm saying he's closer to 100 than he is to 90.
I'm saying that's not true.
Let's find this out. I think we talked about this.
I don't think he's in this.
I think he's 91, 90. 90 or 91.
No, you're right. He's 90.
Yeah.
1930. Nuts.
I mean, he is closer to 100 than he is 50. But
Christopher Plummer's actually a year older than Eastwood. He's 91. He's born in 29.
Oh.
By the way, Christopher Plummer looks dashing and youthful, and
I know it's like
his
amazing.
hair is luscious.
Just this amazing hair. He's like
his voice is very crisp, and
Christopher Plummer as Wellington with his dashing hair and his gentlemanly affectations.
And that's one thing I've noticed about this is apparently this is the director's only English film, but he was really good with building up the tension between the battles between what Britain wanted to do and what Napoleon was trying to do.
This was his only film?
No, his only English film.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, his only English language film that he directed. But like, as somebody with ADD that gets distracted easily, I got sucked into this pretty good. It's a good balance between, representing each side and what they were trying to accomplish, but at the same time, giving it enough dialogue and enough, he stretches it out enough and builds the tension that then when the battle scenes are going off, you're just so engrossed in it already that it's like, it just feels like one long kind of redemption action pick from 1970 it really kept my attention. And what's Rod Steiger? I can't even remember.
Yeah, I don't even know the actor, but
I think he was in Pool Hall Junkies. He looks really familiar as a bad guy, as an older
Napoleon?
guy. Napoleon, yeah. But he was really engrossing to watch. He gave a really good performance.
It's like, my complaints about the movie are entirely just because it's a movie and it's constrained by because you don't really, if you don't know. You don't see where Napoleon came from, how he rose up from this little island.
It's one chapter of a giant book.
Yeah,
like,
and just all of his campaigns he did before, him just completely dominating in Europe and installing all of his friends as royalty.
You don't get the grandeur of Napoleon. I mean, you do a little bit, but
you're seeing him on it's very much from an English language perspective where it's isn't it great that we beat this guy who had risen up and thrown monarchy aside, whereas
but at the same time though, what's interesting is that you're watching the movie from Napoleon's perspective. You're seeing somebody, you're only seeing one person's immense love of France that was trying to expand the nation, but you don't see how France felt about this person. Like just the opening scene where he's saying goodbye to his troops is about the only time.
And
then his return.
A little bit. You get a little bit of the return with the national pride that he inspired just because of how successful he was.
Yeah, it was, we're in a slump and this guy riding in on his chair, on top of his supporters might be able to dig us out of this.
The last time where you get an individual who's actual strategic skill and is was able to actually translate on because look at Hitler's what was his strategy?
Hitler was just
whipping people up and
misinformation,
he had generals,
frenzies. Whereas before it's calculated,
but as the leader, he was not he was not this brilliant Napoleon mind as far as that goes. That wasn't what.
Well, but at the same time, though, I mean, the reason that Hitler lasted as long as he did was because he had generals in place that knew what they were doing.
It's a pre-industrialization war, so it's just it's a different thing.
It's different era, different
But
period.
man, yeah,
But it's just interesting there's any number of reasons that can lead to war, but it's just seemed like back in the day, all it was just dominance over the entire continent. It was England versus Russia versus, everybody else just kind of veering for control of land.
because like I feel like if you did like an earlier Napoleon one, like it would be actually really easy to like have like the audience sympathize with him, just because he's on the side of like revolutionary France, overthrowing all of these old inbred like monarchies and empires as just this normal dude, just through like sheer competence. He's just like, no, you inbred Austrian Habsburgs. you're not in charge anymore. We're going to dominate this entire, which you don't really get here, because like in the end he was eventually defeated by all of these old inbred monarchies.
but that's the kind of challenge though, is he's such a monumental figure. It's which side of the story do you tell? Do you tell the
rise or the fall?
Rise up the hill, or the fall? Because
the fall makes more sense because it did set the stage for like England to become this global superpower that was pretty much unchallenged for like a century.
But that's the challenge though. Well, not so much back in the day, but that's the challenge with you're seeing the losing side. It's like watching Troy, where you're watching the ship sink, but you're just waiting for that, when's it going to break in half point? When is it going to hit that low point? Like how grim can things get before, there's a resolution to it. It's interesting that they chose the final battle, but at the same time, if any other point in his life, you wouldn't be engaged because you'd know that he'd just be plowing through up until a certain point.
Yeah, that's true. I really liked how the night before, when there were the shots between Christopher Plummer and
their internal monologue,
like they're playing chess.
Yeah,
it's very cool.
They're trying to determine what each other's thinking, and that's what I liked.
The pan where they would cut, and then it would be in the next room. You almost thought they were in the same room.
Well, it's the same. They're studying the same maps, trying to prepare for the same battle, and so they're trying to each other's trying to interpret the other's thoughts, and so you're hearing I like that they're calm, and outwardly they got to project confidence, and
you're hearing their
you got to have
where he's like,
where inside they're just screaming, and it's like what do I do?
Like, I am not a young man anymore. I don't really have it. Like you get that. Like I don't have it anymore.
His interior the interior monologue of both of them throughout the film? Sometimes I liked it, and sometimes
I feel like it's jarring when they first start doing it. Eventually, you're like, okay, and they kind of explain it because they're like they don't want to actually have any scene where they're like explaining their thought process and their strategy.
But that's what I mean.
It wouldn't make sense because the whole point is that they don't want to do that.
Well, no, it's not that it wouldn't make sense. It'd be boring because if you get Christopher Plummer and then a room of 6 generals, discussing, how do we get these wagons through the mud, or how do we get here, as opposed to Plummer freaking out thinking, we got to wait till noon. Nature's got to dry up. We got to be able to move these. It makes it much more engaging, because instead of just having, it's like watching a Ken Burns documentary if they were all going to discuss their battle tactics, rather than just, hearing the panic and the discern in their voice, because, each side wants to win, but one of them's going to lose. And so they're struggling to contain that while remaining calm on the outside. It's interesting the way they did it.
What do you guys feel about the pig scene? Did you feel like that took you out of the movie?
No, I feel like there was more like just trying to add characterization to Wellington, because it seems like this movie is not big on characters at all, and the only two it does care about is Napoleon and Wellington.
It's the 1970s version of lifting the movie a little bit, because there's not much you could have done.
Just trying to convey like his
it's such a grim situation.
His men and
and Napoleon's struggling to stay on his feet, with his illness, and Wellington's panicking, wondering if his backup's going to come at the same time. And so I can imagine they wanted something to lift a little, aside from the pig.
Is it the contrast between how Wellington treats his men versus the solemn, deep love that Napoleon has for his men? It's just a little bit different how they treat it.
I think it's just trying to
I think it's more
portray a different
portray the confidence, because Wellington's, waiting on. Wellington's got more information, knowing there's backup coming, whereas Napoleon's, pushing his men harder, thinking he's trying to catch up and pick up the slack to flank them,
beat them before the backup,
before they can fully retreat.
I thought it was really cool. I think Taylor mentioned it during the movie where that really happened. The Wellington's Is it a party?
It was like the officer corps for like his army. Was
Some
like
dude rolls up,
this dance,
super
and
muddy.
Yeah, they all learned that Wellington was on there, that Napoleon was on the move, and they all had to. Had to wrap it up.
They got to go now.
Ship out, yeah.
And it's crazy. They pull back the camera and you see like 97 candles.
Yeah.
There was more. There was hundreds
Maybe
of candles.
hundreds of candles.
The sets and costume designs alone in this movie, it's one of those...
We're unsure that they're real candles or if they're like...
No, they're real candles, but it's just the way that they're lit, because there's no way that a wax candle with a regular wick would be able to stay lit.
No.
That's an unanswerable question that I'd really like to know.
I bet you someone knows. There's probably a way.
It has to have been gas. There has to have been.
Imagine
that
like
seems way harder.
the candle guy
or oil.
Hey bro, it's time to light the candles.
Because I can see like a white tube with oil.
I could see those being fake.
Because
like,
the way they're
candles.
the blow,
that wouldn't have surprised me. But gas though, that's insane. There's no way.
There's no way they could get gas tubes up there, man. That's
but I
insane.
mean, the production budget. That's true where they were shooting.
But yeah, like as far as like the things that you put under food plates that you light and go.
Yeah.
There's stuff they could.
But I just mean
they're not necessarily. They're probably not.
They're
accurate candles.
Yes, I just mean the set design and the costume design for this movie are crazy. Like it's something you don't see nowadays with green screens and budgeting and everything, because you really do see 1,000 horses and 5,000 extras marching through fields and flares going off.
Uniforms.
Yeah, that's how I found this movie
uniforms.
originally. It was a YouTube clip of one of the cavalry charges. I was like, "What is this?"
And Taylor, you said that you had to buy it from an Australian company
to get the Blu-ray version of it, because apparently this movie's like, I don't know, like I guess it didn't do well enough to have like a dedicated following. But yeah, like the only way I could get a Blu-ray of it was importing it from this Australian company.
That's insane.
Like there's a German one you can get, but that doesn't play here. It's it's a whole thing. I don't know why.
Because of like region restrictions or whatever.
This Australian one for some reason is region free. I don't know.
That's crazy. Well, I wrote down two quotes that I thought were really cool. He who saves it. This is Napoleon saying this. He who saves a nation violates no law.
Yeah. Yeah, you get a great like the kind of the maniacalness that like later Napoleon, after having had power poison his brain for like 10 years.
Yeah.
Like having and also having armies fall before him for most of his career, like that damages someone like permanently. There's no way you don't get brain damage from that.
Well, no, I mean it's like the Buzz Aldrin effect. It's he's pushed and he's conquered so much. It's like, where do you go except for, either you keep going and you keep conquering, or you're waiting to die, which is, the main reason I'm sure he dreaded being shipped off to the island was because, my life is over at that point. His actual
fate, like if you think about like there's great paintings, like multiple of him just staring out into the ocean on his island prison, and you're just like, think about that, like having conquered Europe, been the supreme emperor of France, having it all taken away because you lost.
And now he's just a ruler of dirt and trees.
Warrior King Napoleon.
I really like the contrast. Here's my other quote is, what are your plans? To beat the French.
Yeah, that's
like
great.
Points out. Like,
I am your second in command. If something were to happen to you, I must know your plans. What are your plans?
Well, to beat the French. It's so good.
At over 12 million euros, it was one of the most expensive films ever made at the time.
Oh, okay.
Producer Laurentis had wanted to make it for 10 years, but his production company couldn't afford it. Then Mosfilm, the Russian company, stepped in, contributing $4 million, a third of the budget, 20,000 soldiers, a full brigade of Soviet cavalry, and vast numbers of engineers and laborers to prepare locations.
No wonder he thanked them at the end of the credits.
For 48 days of shooting in Ukraine, which they negotiated in the 1960s. If it had been made in the West without the Red Army's assistance, it would have cost 3 times as much. To recreate the battlefield, the Soviets bulldozed 2 hills deep into valley, laid miles of roads, transplanted 5,000 trees, sowed fields of rye, barley, wildflowers, and reconstructed 4 buildings. The production included Italian and Russian technicians, English and French advisors, Yugoslavian stuntmen, which you can tell the stuntmen a lot of times don't know how to act. The battle scenes are kind of interesting when you notice the facial expressions because they look very confused about what to do. And actors from America, Canada, England, Ireland, Italy, France, and Russia. Holy moly.
Well,
so even at the time,
and
when they were doing in-camera stuff, this was like an extraordinary.
This was extraordinary.
They had to thread the needle and go like to the Soviet Union to make it.
And you can't really you can rent this for $5 or whatever, or buy it and stream it. But it's like not really. It's not in the Criterion, like you said.
Yeah, it's not that notable of a movie.
Not notable.
And that's why they think the main reason why it bombed is there wasn't any really big names at the time, because Rod Steiger wasn't really big.
Well, whatever. Orson Welles is in it for 5 minutes.
That's what I was just thinking. That's the one thing that. That's the only notable actor other than Christopher Plummer at the time is
stunt casting to
and I want
a minor role.
And I want to know how, or maybe
it's like Liam Neeson in Battleship. Remember that?
Yeah.
I guess it was because he was technically he exiled himself at the time, but I'm guessing. Oh yeah, no, it was because that was the 70s. He didn't come back to the U.S. till like 75. But that's the funny thing is he must have just been wallowing over in Europe, not being able to get anything financed, and then found out about a production and they shoved him into a authentic costume for 2 days of shooting while he sweated his butt off.
Was he that fat or was he in a fat suit? I couldn't tell. He looked very large.
He was that fat. 1970, he was that fat.
I don't know, man. He looked like a character.
Yeah, he looked way too fat.
No, it's because
I can't say for sure.
If you see pictures of him, there's a movie he made called F is for Fake in like 1975, where he told 3 stories and 2 of them were fake and 1 of them was true, and you were trying to figure out like which one was true. But it was him and his Italian girlfriend at the time, and he was full blown Elvis, where he was eating all the peanut butter and banana sandwiches and was just deep fried. He was that big at the time.
He was giant.
Yeah,
he was a fat dude.
He was very large.
Like even in that show, the one with Charlton Heston, the black and white one, where he's the corrupt sheriff and they're in Mexico. The Touch of Evil. It's like 1955, and Orson Welles is the corrupt sheriff. And even then, like a decade and a half after Citizen Kane, he was still getting pretty large, or he was pretty large and sweaty.
Your review we're answering the question: should you watch this?
Yes, because this would be worth it to know. To check your history to see like what inaccuracies there might be, but
yeah, it's like I'm not that sure. Like I've heard that there are things, but it's like
just scrolling through Wikipedia, there was quite a few like entries that were showing
like how the cavalry charges weren't as impressive because the ground was more wet than they wanted to. But
which is true.
But it's like I'm glad that they did the full impressive looking cavalry charges.
Oh, I know. That's the crazy thing is just
like I'm fine with them just being like, it's like, wouldn't it have been cooler though if they had been able to run full speed? And I'm like, yeah, it would have been, and let's see it.
And that's put it on screen.
Yeah,
so I can
please
see
put it on screen for my perusal and enjoyment.
It's like the first half. I think it's worth watching just because it's interesting to see Napoleon's perspective and get an idea of such an historical figure. But then the second half is just plain balls to the walls explosion. There's so much smoke.
It's so cool, especially for an old movie. It's like when you like get old movies like this, you're like
3 different shots I can think of Christopher Plummer just having a conversation and then huge fireballs just going off behind him in the background, like bombs just going off. It's just crazy.
Just like shrapnel wind that's just smoke and
people getting nailed in their stovepipe hats, and it's
oh my gosh,
military. It's interesting seeing the military tactics as they have progressed through the ages, where it's
very unrecognizable from like now or even 100 years ago.
Well, it's just hilarious how like gentlemanly they try and be right before just casual slaughter of the enemy.
Yeah, it's insane, like sending thousands of people to die.
Yeah, merely tolerating the Scottish for their assistance. Otherwise, they would have just shipped them off too.
And that's another very cool scene is the Scottish bagpipes,
the support group,
the Highlander Corps, or whatever it is. Very, very cool.
Yeah. Thank you, Scotland, for representing this battle. All right, Cole. With that being said, what's your rating?
I'd give it 3 out of 4. It's kind of like Taylor was saying.
3 out of 4. You've had a lot to say during this podcast, man.
I had a lot to say, but at the same time, it's like Taylor was saying. There's so much more. Like it
might be confusing a little bit.
That's the thing is like when I first saw it, I did not really understand what was going on.
Or it would have been interesting to see a movie where the first half is Napoleon's, inner thoughts during, at the start of the Battle of Waterloo, and
maybe interspersed with like his previous campaigns or something like that.
Yeah, interspersed with the previous campaign.
Because that's the other thing is like what biopic you could do is like a framed narrative and like having to do.
But it'd be interesting to see kind of the first half would have been
how he's way up
see
and
his
then
rise followed by the fall.
We'll see Plummer and Napoleon kind of racing to get to the spot. But then the second half would be interesting to actually see Napoleon's like exile and where he was shipped off to and what life was
All
like
right, Hollywood,
living on the island.
make this film that we've
like,
just described.
It's like this, yeah.
Like it would, to see the second half be Heart of Darkness, where he's just in a hut, on an island, just kind of waiting to die, reliving the horrors of war that he came so close to victory, only to be defeated at the last minute because of
so close to being the new Caesar. So close.
Taylor,
it's like I would recommend it. I'd give it 1 billion trillion stars on my own scale, but I will give the caveat that like the movie itself does have an assumption that you know more about the events than,
I agree.
than I think most people are going to. I mean, even like, I don't know, the 70s. Like they expect you to know like all of these minor details, and it's harder to track.
And I asked you a ton of questions.
Yeah, no,
because you are advocate, historical.
Yeah, no, I've learned a lot more about it like after seeing this movie. But again, I saw this years ago. But
maybe that's the point in general, because you either have a movie that's bogged down with opening. You're either reading a novel before the movie begins, or it's going to see a sci-fi movie that gets you interested in the constellations, makes you want to buy a telescope afterwards. It makes you want to learn more about what happened before and after, because like this is what his final battle was like. What was his life like before? What happened after this grand
probably
epic.
Like that's another thing is like you don't understand why like everyone was so scared of him coming back. You don't get him dominating Europe for the 20 years that he did.
Yeah. That's the crazy thing is he gets ushered out.
So if you didn't know, you're like, why are they so obsessed with stopping this guy?
That's the crazy thing is within the span of 20 minutes, you have this famed general who right before Revolution was like...
he's nobody. Minor noble on a Corsican island.
Well, he's the celebrity. Yeah. He gets exiled only to come back strong with 1,000 men, which I'm still curious to figure out where he got an army.
I don't know how he got back, but
that's crazy.
Some conspiracy.
A second uprising with little.
No, it's Count of Monte Cristo. That's how that starts, right?
Yeah, it literally sounds like a story from the Bible, like 1,000 versus 100,000. But he's so beloved that he gets the enemy to throw their weapons down and come join him because
that was a really cool scene.
He was.
He
was beloved. He was the champion of the French.
And that's what's interesting is you only see
French himself though.
You only see him. You only see his version of France. You don't see how the French people saw him, other than refusing to lay down their arms.
Well, but I mean, again, it's just because they're trying to be a 2-hour movie.
But that's what I mean. You either have 4.5 hours where everything's explained, or you have to go do some.
And the thing is like if
some learning of your own.
For like a miniseries and stuff, you don't get the scale that you get with this.
This could be a cool miniseries.
It is, but you wouldn't get the production that this got.
Oh you're right.
So it's one of those things.
It's like
you'd have John Adams on HBO.
Yeah, it's like it would take CG, and you're like, well, this is okay, I guess. But like as far as the spectacle goes,
but
that's hard, huh?
But at the same time,
I don't know the answer.
I think they made it at the perfect time because if you were to try and make it today, it would be the same deal where Russell Crowe or Marlon Brando's got to have their Oscar-winning shot where they they're chewing the scenery and really giving it all they got.
The Napoleon guy gets a few shots like when he's dictating those letters and stuff.
But it's not over the top to the point where you're expecting him to take a chair and smash it over a table. Like you can sense battling, trying to save France, trying to save his reputation while battling off stomach cancer, the illness that's killing him at the same time. He's basically being killed on two fronts, and he's trying to fight out both.
He's not the healthy young man who conquered Europe, and he knows that, and you kind of get a feel for his self.
But he doesn't. He plays it enough that he doesn't go overboard. He walks that fine line pretty well in terms of acting.
Another thing is it's hard to understand the kind of the greater strategy about it, which could be intentional because they don't on the field. It'd be very confusing as well.
Yeah.
If they had a map, you can look up where people after the fact draw the lines of divisions that went where and stuff. It's they could have done that. I don't know that would have helped.
Well,
just because it's
you could.
It was confusing for the people there, and if they're trying to recreate that, then maybe that's what they were doing.
That's
me.
That's the thing that's the bittersweetness of it, though, is that the battle is so insane. You get sucked into it. I think it's about 45 minutes at least.
It feels like it's a good.
I don't think they started until an hour and a half in, but
a lot of there's a decent amount of setup, and then then it's.
But at the same time, explanation would have made things useful, but then it would have pulled you out of the action because you'd be watching one section over here, but then you'd be stopping.
There's so many things we can't answer.
It's
this is it.
It's what you get, and it's hard to see what else they could have done in a lot of ways.
But that's what I like, though. I mean, if they it makes you want to go, look up and actually
see what happened.
To see what happened. And then if you were to watch it again,
I have to agree with Cole, and I usually side with Taylor more. But
it took 8 years, but I finally got him to agree with me on something. Hey,
I think I'm going to give it a large bucket. I can't give it a golden bucket.
It's very much like if you don't care about military history or like battle scenes, you will not like this movie at all.
Yeah,
there's nothing there for you.
It's definitely a very niche
that's why I'm saying like my billion trillion stars is very much very like specific to me growing up, like seeing the Lord of the Rings movies at like 11, being like, why aren't all movies like with large battles? And so
if you're like that, then I agree with Cole, because at first I was like, Cole's super loving this, but he gave it a lower rating just because.
Because I mean it's not like Lawrence of Arabia Lawrence of Arabia has like battle scenes like comparable, fewer.
It's something,
fewer.
But it's much more character like driven movie.
This is a movie where you would either read a book about Napoleon and you would want to see this movie to see how it would play out, or in reverse where you would watch this, whereas now I actually want to look up to see if there's some audiobooks that I can listen to.
I think it does give you like a really good feel for like battles with musketry and cavalry, like them forming squares to fend off a cavalry charge.
Just a side note, it's been 8 years and 5 days now since the Movie of the Month Club was formed.
We only have about 4 years of recordings.
Yeah, the technology had to catch up with us.
But I remember it was when Skyfall came out was when we got the idea, because that was right when you left.
It was when you got the TV, the big TV.
Yeah, when I started my job.
May it rest in peace.
May it rest in peace. Now we have a giant 133-inch screen. Humble brag.
As it should be.
I think with that, we should leave the listeners to go and research the history of Napoleon.
Dude. Age of Napoleon is a great podcast. I recommend it. It's like right up to where he's emperor now. So, I mean, it doesn't give you the whole story, but it gives you a great background of his rise.
Yeah.
Age of Napoleon. Highest recommendation. I was stoked while I was listening to that.
Taylor, thank you. As always, Cole, thank you. Yeah. And we will see you next time at the movies.
Hit me up on the Twitters or the Instas if you want to interact with the great Popcorn Priest at Popcorn Priest. I respond to every tweet, post, comment, hashtag, and whatever else there is. Let us know if there's something you would like us to review. Also, if you've enjoyed this or any of our previous episodes, please subscribe so you can get notifications on our newest episodes. I love movies, and I would love it if you would share the love. Muchas gracias. Another way to share the love is sharing those dollars. I've created a Patreon account. If you've liked anything up until this point and want to support the show so we can continue to bring you these entertaining reviews, please do so at patreon.com/popcornpriest. Next week, the director of this film once said of it, the plot is kind of secondary to other things. You want a toe? I can get you a toe, believe me. There are ways, dude. You don't want to know about it, believe me. I can get you a toe by 3 o'clock this afternoon with nail polish. It's our 70th episode, and we have some fun surprises for you. As always, thanks for listening. This has been Should You Watch This with the Popcorn Priest, and for Cole and Taylor, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.